Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're going to do Fantasy 3.0, where we rank all of our guys, every position, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, from top to bottom, and we kind of talk about why they're there, why we have, why certain guys are above others, and why we're not necessarily like consensus, because I know that there's a lot of guys that we do not have where these other big companies have them. We take really big stands, and we believe in them, so we're really excited to share it with y'all.
Yeah, really excited. It's our final rankings. It's peak draft season, so we're going to be getting this out as soon as we can, so we can be helping you guys where we can to be drafting the best teams that are possible for this draft. Whether
Absolutely.
it's best ball, redraft, it doesn't matter.
Yep. So we're going to start with the quarterback position, and I'll pop it up on the screen now. We're going to go by tiers, of course, and you can see on the screen, we have our first tier here, looking at the Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts tier. All three of these guys, have certain upsides that you just can't, you just get too much, like two guys on there have 15 rushing touchdown upside, while the other one has possibly the highest ceiling when it comes to passing yards, especially with his new receivers. So it's a very exciting tier, and that's why they're tier one guys.
Yeah, and I don't think this tier moved at all this entire offseason for any of the rankings that we did. I guess the notable omission is just MVP Lamar Jackson, but I mean, I just don't see the high ceiling with him. Last year was a very down year in terms of quarterback production. Like, we only have one guy, obviously, is Josh Allen, that went over 22 points a game. He cleared Jalen Hurts, who was QB2, by 40 points, essentially, right, which was basically 2.5 points a game. So he was a big differentiator if you went with him. But Lamar Jackson, I think he was a fourth rounder, and he only had 21 a game, 24 touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns. Like, he didn't really win you your league. He had a huge game to win the MVP against the 49ers, but that was pretty much, one of his only games where he just truly broke out and had the ceiling games that we're accustomed to seeing. So that, coupled with other guys returning, I just think that he needs to be in the following tier. Patrick Mahomes, I almost flirted with the idea of putting him above Josh Allen, but I wouldn't have gotten that over with you. And at the end of the day, this is a fantasy ranking. It's not a, who's more talented, who's the better quarterback overall.
It's Patrick Mahomes, if that was the case, for sure.
But, Josh Allen is just going to have the entire production of his offense this year. And so I just don't see a way that he's not a top 3 quarterback. But Mahomes, I can see a way where he still doesn't get back to his top 5 form because of the receiving or uncertainties that he has.
Well, yeah, and he doesn't have the rushing upside, and that's kind of what that's why Justin Fields was a top, 10 to 15 quarterback on most fantasy weeks. It's just because he has the opportunity to go for over 100 rushing yards. Both of these guys, one has a tush push in Jalen Hurts, and then the other guy, he's just a competitor when he wants to run the ball. And so that's why Josh Allen sits atop the tier 1. And then I think let's get it. So in the next tier, you can see the next guys up on the board. We just talked about Lamar a little bit. He has opportunities, obviously, to make the top tier on a lot of boards. But for us, we just think there's a tad bit of a gap. Then you have CJ Stroud, who has one of the best receiving cores in football, if not the best. Joe Burrow, who we think is going to have a bounce back year, possibly. We both believe that, Cincinnati is very good and they could end up being top 3 in the AFC. Kyler Murray is a guy that we have really stood by, planted our flag a little bit on. He's going much higher for us than other platforms. And then Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb does sign up. So CeeDee will be there.
Yeah, so that was the big difference for us so far in these quarterback rankings. Kyler Murray, not only was he in the tier below, but he was behind Dak Prescott. Obviously, he jumps above him in this ranking. We're just kind of, again, planting our flag, so to speak. We're making the point in these final rankings to purely take a stand on the guys that we are in love with and putting in the places maybe even a little too high. But it's just like, when it comes down to it, who would you rather have And Kyler Murray, I just think a year removed, he started coming to his own. He has the rushing upside, and I just feel like he's still capable, even if he doesn't have all of his weapons there. Whereas Dak is kind of like he is completely out of it if CeeDee Lamb is not there, which now he is signed, but there's always that risk.
So also with Kyler, upgraded receiving core since last year. And then the biggest thing for me, and this is a thing that I think is overlooked, is their defense is so bad that they're going to be giving up points. And Kyler Murray is going to have to be scoring points. And, you know, the carnival teams, we like attacking because if they're going to give up points, they're going to be throwing the ball. They're going to be pushing the ball down the field. They're not going to be conservative. They're not giving the ball to a 40-year-old. I'm sorry. He's got 40-year-old knees, I guess, in the James Conner behind him. It's just, I think Kyler has that also. And that's a little bit of, makes me more confident.
And we're not that different. There's a couple of platforms that have Dak slightly above him, but at the same time, there's, you know, a huge gap on DraftKings and Underdog now between the two. It's a full 2-round difference, and obviously Underdog and DraftKings is the sharper ADP. We're kind of siding more with the ADP of those platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Just I don't know. I don't think you can really go wrong either way, but I think Dak again is the last guy where I'm just like, I'm good with just one quarterback on my redraft team, because if you go elite quarterback, you don't necessarily have to do the second quarterback if it's not a super flex, especially if it's not a super flex.
Right.
It just allocates your resources to other important positions. And I just don't want to make a decision every week. Do I start CJ Stroud or do I start Joe Burrow? There's no point, because there's a lot of times when you'll be wrong and it could cost you championships. We have a buddy in our friends league that, you know, he was back and forth, and this is the tight end position, but tight end, I don't know if I start Dalton Schultz or whoever it was. And Dalton Schultz went off. He put him on his bench, and he would have won the championship if he didn't do that. Quarterbacks the same way. We typically like to prioritize getting an elite guy, not getting the backup, and then just having a ton of wide receivers and running backs, which just helps because those are the positions that have more injuries, risk, and all that good stuff.
Right, of course. And then looking at Joe Burrow and CJ Stroud, those two guys talking about their upside, most of their upside comes from passing the ball. We think that both of these guys have opportunities to go over at least, 4,000 yards is like kind of feels like a floor with these two. Pushing the ball down the field and stuff like that. They both have elite receivers. Didn't really want to separate them. I think they're in the perfect spot next to each other. And then, of course, you have Lamar Jackson, who has the rushing upside, but not the passing upside. But his rushing floor and his ability to create is why he's so high on this list.
Right. So we'll go into our third tier. Anthony Richardson. We're the only platform that's going to have him in a third tier. He is basically consensus a top 6 quarterback. I said this in our recent video that we recorded when we were reacting to the preseason, but everybody is excited about Kyler Murray being a dark horse, but everyone is too afraid to put Kyler Murray above Anthony Richardson. Yeah. There's not one platform that does that, and we are going to be the platform that does that and be right about that. Says that. I am very confident in Kyler Murray outscoring Anthony Richardson in terms of fantasy points per game, whatever you want to say. And on top of that, I feel better stacking him with Marvin Harrison or Trey McBride, even Michael Wilson, compared to spending a third-round pick on a Michael Pittman Jr. And then, again, Anthony Richardson, his last preseason game, he struggled. 8 for 14, a pick, 6, a fumble.
Yeah.
Like, he is a raw quarterback, and you're not going to be happy if you're double stacking or single stacking him and just relying on that for the majority of your production on your team.
Yeah, of course, doing fantasy for so long, I watch other fantasy platforms, and all of the fantasy platforms want to say that Anthony Richardson is the QB1 this year. Well, if you're watching them platforms, guys, you're going to be very disappointed. And I'm okay saying that to y'all because I'm that confident that Anthony Richardson is going to not necessarily fail, but I just see his ceiling being, of course, his ceiling is insane, but his floor and his ability to bust is worse than anybody in this tier 3, including these rookies, in my opinion. So you just be nervous about this because everybody's so confident, but it's not that easy.
Like we put him at the top of this tier, but we thought about even putting him behind
Yes.
rookies of Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels.
Yes.
Now I understand that's a hot take. That is just blasphemous. But Jaden Daniels is a better quarterback than Anthony Richardson.
Oh yeah,
If
both
they
of
were
them are.
If they were in the same draft class, there was no question he was going to go above him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a better thrower. He's faster. He protects himself better, even though it's not enough for my liking.
Right.
But regardless, he's behind him. He moved into this tier as well, and actually above Trevor. But he has the elite rushing upside. The only thing is his weapons, other than Terry McLaurin, especially now that Jahan Dotson is no longer there, is just very below average. And so even with he has an offensive-minded coordinator, or Cliff Kingsbury being the offensive-minded guy on that team, I see him having a really solid rookie season. And you were the one that convinced me on that one. So that is your call if it does work out. And then Caleb Williams, I see guys that are just like, I don't see a rookie being a top 10 quarterback. And it's just like, you just saw CJ Stroud do that. And he is in your top 5. Anthony Richardson, you saw as a rookie 2 games full. And you're willing to put him there and not willing for a guy in a better situation on a better team. Just put him there.
Yeah, we were projecting the Texans to go 5-12 last year.
Yeah,
on average. The Bears went 7-10 last year and got way better. They brought in 2 receivers. One of them is a rookie, but he will be elite. And then you have an elite slot receiver.
Their
in
receiving
Keenan
core,
Allen.
it's not even close to Houston. And Houston arguably has the best receiving core, right? From top to bottom. Well, Chicago, if you're just saying top 3 versus top 3, there's no question I'm taking Chicago.
All day long.
All day long. So
for sure.
They have the weapons. It's just you don't think that he'll be a rookie making plays and doing it this early. Maybe it's a slow burn for a couple weeks because their first couple games are tough and against above average defenses, but he's worth being a QB1 this year. And Trevor Lawrence is too. He's a former number 1 pick that hasn't really come into his own yet. He was QB7 in 2022, but he hasn't had the full from start to finish season that we were expecting from him. But I just think that this is his best overall chance to. His receiving core, he doesn't have a true alpha yet, but it's a well-balanced, like you brought up in our preseason takeaway, and he's got a workhorse running back. He's got a great tight end. I just think he's going to put up QB1 numbers, and he deserved to be in this tier, even though we ranked him 13th.
Yeah, and I will say, like, if you had to, when the draft happened for all these guys, if we had all of them in the same draft class, like the only person that's not above Anthony Richardson is Jordan Love, and he's still a first rounder. But all the other 3 are generational-ish talents compared to Anthony Richardson, who was the most worryful talent, especially after you watched what happened with Trey Lance. It's not crazy to think that Anthony Richardson could be the next Trey Lance. If he gets injured again, he could fall to the 3rd quarterback on some team somewhere.
Yeah, and right now he is by far our highest positive differential from ECR expert consensus ranking. 22 spots, 2 full rounds ahead of everybody else. ESPN, what are you doing? 6 sleeper. You're supposed to be the sharp one, 125. Like, what are we doing with these rankings? I have him in a 20 team as my starting quarterback, and I feel fantastic about my team. But yeah, that was worth noting with this tier.
And then Jordan Love, we haven't really talked about. Lots of receivers, lots of options. Hard to figure out which one's going to be the best. But Jordan Love, we don't really know if he's going to be that guy yet. But he showed at the end of the year that he is pretty good at football. So he's
got a reasonable into the year with his schedule.
Yep. And so let's go to tier 4. Very short tier. Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Tua, all guys that stand in the pocket. It's kind of honestly, all 3 of these guys are the same to me. All have elite receivers, or a elite receiver, and maybe an elite tight end if you're Jared Goff. And they all just stand back there and they don't make mistakes. That's what their job is. Don't make mistakes, manage the game, and be 14 through 16 in tier 4.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that these guys aren't in tier 3. And obviously they all had solid years last year. Tua led the league in passing, but still was not a top 10 fantasy quarterback despite all the injuries. He has the littlest rushing upside out of any quarterback, and that shouldn't be a thing because he's this young. But at the end of the day, that's just not his niche, and it really impacts his fantasy ceiling when he does not have that. Jared Goff, the same way to a similar extent, but also he has the competition to where he could throw for 300 yards and have 0 to 1 touchdowns,
Right.
and they score 30 points.
Running back.
That's in his outcomes, and it's just too inconsistent. He could play great during the game, but fantasy-wise, we need 20 points to feel good about a starting quarterback. And if you're not consistently putting that up, I just don't – it's hard to trust.
Right.
And then with Brock Purdy, again, he's a game manager that, on top of that, he has CMC, who's the 101, obviously. But, he had a career year last year. But if he tries to do more and try to get out of his element, he's going to get in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
There's already weird vibes going around San Francisco. I guess Brandon Ayuk is staying. Maybe not. Maybe he is. But it's just not great vibes. He's not consistent enough to be in that next tier of quarterbacks, and that's why all these guys are where they are.
Yep. And then the next grouping is this is actually a really interesting group because I think, some of these guys could be elevated into tier 4. It's just so many question marks. You have Justin Herbert, great quarterback, but who's his receivers? Is he going to throw the ball enough? They might run the ball 50 times a game.
Mm-hmm.
Deshaun Watson, injured, and also hasn't been the same since he got to Cleveland. Matt Stafford just doesn't have the rushing upside. He has the receivers. He has all the things. Just misses that. Kirk Cousins, injury. Baker, just an average, fun quarterback to watch because he's a little bit of a shit talker and he's fun to watch, but not necessarily elite. And then Aaron Rodgers coming off injury. So it's all around.
This tier 6 quarterbacks did not change in order from tier 2.
Right.
Or, rankings 2.0 is tier 5. They're QB2s, occasional boom. Stack them if you got them, but don't feel comfortable in redraft if you have to start them every week. Not much to talk about here, but we're going to move on to the final tier.
This is interesting. This is an interesting
tier. Yeah, so again, Justin Fields, we have to keep him here. He's not going to start week 1. It's okay. That's not why he's here. It's because if he is starting, and we know that he is in tier 3 with Trevor Lawrence and all these guys that have rushing upside. It's not because he's talented enough to be an NFL quarterback. It's because he can run for 100 yards,
right,
and also throw for 200. Fantasy relevance. So he has to be in the top 25 because of that, because nobody else has that upside. Even if you invest in Bo Nix or Will Levis, you're not going to get 20 points a week or have that upside. You'll have maybe 2 games where they go over that, especially with the receiving cores that they have. But the interesting ones, Bo Nix, obviously, since our 2.0, he is now the Denver Broncos starter. We didn't expect that he'd be that way this early.
Or that impressive. He has been so impressive.
But his receiving core, really, really below average. But yeah, we kind of had the last 2 spots between Bo Nix, Will Levis, Sam Darnold, and Bryce Young, and you left this up to me for the gut call, and we're just like, well, Bo Nix, we feel like deserves to be in the top 25, and then I just went with Will Levis because he is also having an impressive season, off season, training camp, and then into preseason.
One of the better receiving cores.
It's got an offense that fits his style, similar to Bo Nix. And Sam Darnold, it's really just Justin Jefferson and bust. He has okay rushing upside, but nothing that will be consistent.
Right.
And then
Bryce.
With Bryce Young, he also has done well, but it's another let me see it first. But yeah, all these guys really talented. Justin Fields has the upside more than anybody, than even tier 5 has, but he just is not the starter yet.
Yeah, he could, like you said, he could be a tier 3 guy if he plays. Last year, I believe he was, let's see, fantasy points per game. He was in the top 15. I know that much. He was 12th overall in fantasy points per game.
And that was with the thumb injury.
Right.
But he also had a 40-point game before
I remember
that goes
that.
down. You won a lot of money that week.
I did.
You stacked him and DJ Moore.
It was awesome.
Yeah, that was incredible. But yeah, that's the ceiling he has. Nobody else has a 40-point ceiling that's above him until you get into the top 10.
Right.
So, that's kind of end of our quarterback tier.
Yep. And then tier 1 of the running backs is pretty easy. Here's the guy.
It's him.
He is him.
The thing to note is he just we haven't heard from him since he had his calf strain.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to miss time from it early in the season, but it could limit him. It could reduce his workload. It could be all these things. It could be a re-injury risk. We've seen twice where he's been the 101 and he has gotten injured that season. And then he, is under the radar and then breaks out again and has the biggest gap we've ever seen from the running back position. Let me pull that up just because this is why he's 101 from a PPR perspective. Last year, the RB2, 290.5. He had 391. So he was a full 101 points higher than the next running back. And on top of that, Breece Hall was not consistent. He had those last two for just like, we'll give you 40 touches.
Yeah, trying to get the rushing yards.
So it was even bigger of a gap. In our eyes, he's a touchdown bet every week.
Take the bet.
Not much to say about him other than just there's injury risk, but that's the same with every other player.
Right. He still plays running back, right, guys? Yeah. All right. And then in tier 2, we'll start talking about some of these guys. Lots of good football players in this grouping, starting with Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, JT, Kyren. All these guys are workhorses. Travis Etienne, Saquon, and Josh Jacobs. All these guys are going to be the workhorses for their teams. Should see 65-ish% of the snaps, except for maybe Jahmyr, but he has a completely different skill set than anybody else. So.
Yeah, I guess one of the things was with Bijan and Breece, they've been back and forth with ADP platforms all year. We kind of stuck with Bijan at 2. We just believe in the upside and consistency more. Breece Hall, he finishes RB2. It was incredible, but he didn't make you the playoffs solely because of himself. He didn't really get that workload until late in the year, and so it's kind of very, very skewed towards that. And then with Bijan, he just kind of didn't get enough touches, which we think he's inheriting a lot more, and we feel the safest about him. So that's why he stays at 2. Jahmyr Gibbs was one that he did go down with injury, and we were wondering, should we move him behind anybody, or should we just kind of keep him the same? And we decided to just let it ride. He's not going to miss any time. If he was just a straight up workhorse back like a Kyren Williams, maybe I'd be a little bit more concerned. Because he's got David Montgomery taking a heavy dosage of the in-between tackle stuff, he's going to have his floor games when he has 12 touches.
Mm-hmm.
He's just going to be very efficient with them, and he's going to have 5 targets. So we just wanted to keep him where he was for now. And then one of the bigger ones is that we truly just took the stand. Like we said, we moved Saquon Barkley back all the way to 8th. He's just somebody that we just don't believe in having a pass game workload at all. Jalen Hurts hasn't really been one to prioritize running back targets to begin with. DeAndre Swift is a pure PPR kind of back, and he didn't get next to any significant or consistent workload in the passing game last year. And Kyren led the league in targets or touches per game and all that stuff. ETN, we just are falling in love with to have a breakout season. And then JT, we think, he's had back-to-back years of injuries. He's kind of in a similar build to what Christian McCaffrey was before his rebound years over the last 2 seasons, that we just think he's going to prove again why he is as good as he is.
Right, absolutely. Looking at some of these guys that I really like, moving up Kyren, it just makes a lot of sense if he's going to get the Sean McVay treatment, in my opinion. And then with Josh Jacobs, someone we hadn't really gone over, he was in tier 3 prior, but we moved him into tier 2. They have injuries on their side right now because, AJ Dillon is out for the season, and we haven't seen Marshawn Lloyd since preseason week 1.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets that bump for that reason. He should be the workhorse, obviously, anyways. But now it's like he is the guy.
We were already above him, and we didn't move him in front of anybody. We just moved him into the next tier because now he's just officially he's the workhorse.
Right.
for the foreseeable future, and I just don't see Marshawn Lloyd really touching anything relevant unless he gets banged up once again.
Right, exactly. And then we're going to talk about tier 3. So starting it off, we start with Isaiah Pacheco at the 10, Devon HN at the 11. We had a full conversation about how to say his name on the car ride to Louisiana this last weekend. James Cook at the 12 and Derrick Henry at the 13. Kenneth Walker coming in at 14, who is a big riser for us. We're very excited about him. And then Alvin Kamara moving down a little bit from his earlier spot and to 15, Joe Mixon at the 16, and then Rachaad White at the 17.
So with these, in terms of the first three, not a ton of movement. Obviously, Isaiah Pacheco, we jumped over James Cook, Devon Achane as well. But all of these guys are really good in their different ways. I think Pacheco is as safe as it gets. He almost deserves to be in the next tier because he truly has no competition for touches. We just don't think he's nearly as talented as the other guys. He's just inheriting a workload. And we've made mistakes before where we're just like, oh, he's going to get the workload. And it just doesn't happen. And so this is the highest he's ever been. We're just kind of right in the middle, smack dab in the middle with him in terms of expert consensus. Devon Achane, a lot more the boom bust guy. Best ball platforms love him. He's RB7 there. But behind that, I think it just feels better if he's your RB2 at the end of the day, just because there's games that he's probably going to have 8 to 10, and it's going to hurt when you spend a second rounder on him.
Mm-hmm.
James Cook also doesn't really have a workload, but he does have competition for running back touchdowns because Josh Allen loves to run the football. Derrick Henry and Kenneth Walker in tandem, we moved up into this tier. We've slandered Derrick Henry as much as anybody this entire offseason. At the end of the day, we hate him at his ADP still, but we cannot just get away from him. He is one of the safest RB2s you can have. He is going to get all the volume. He's going to have 15-plus touchdown upside. He just has no upside in the passing game. He's older. He's been he's gotten less efficient each of the last 2 seasons, and he has Lamar to compete with as well. He'll probably be an efficient back if you can get him at a discount or a deal, or he falls to you. Cool. He's as safe as it gets. He's our first RB2 for a reason. He's a safe RB2, but he's going as a middle RB1, and that's why we didn't like it.
And then looking at the last 4 guys, Kenneth Walker is one of the biggest risers for us. We really like him. He's going to be the workhorse for the Seattle Seahawks. The reason he's not higher is because he doesn't have a ton of pass volume. Then the next guy is the pass volume king in Alvin Kamara, but he's got a weird situation going on there. And I don't think New Orleans is very good. That makes it even harder to want to draft a guy that, of course, if he has the pass volume, that's great. But if he doesn't have the touchdown upside, it makes it a little bit tougher to want to get him.
Joe Mixon, Rachaad White, we both dropped 2 spots each, as a casualty to Henry and Walker moving up into this tier. Mixon's been banged up this entire, camp. He's also older as well. And it's a potent offense that just has a lot of volume to go around. So maybe he kind of dwindles down into, a mid to low RB2. Right now, he's kind of all over the place in terms of his ADP. He's the RB11 on ESPN. Don't touch that. But he's RB 15, 16 in the 5th, 6th round on best ball draft. So don't mind that at all.
Right.
Rachaad White, he's just very inefficient. Bucky Irving is the guy behind him that probably a more explosive version of himself. And, Rachaad White, he only was relevant because he had no competition for touches. Maybe he finally does. Well, it just kind of remains to be seen.
Yep. And then in tier 4, starting up tier 4, lots of good players here, actually, that, we're excited about. Just have a lot of question marks across the board. Aaron Jones is the starting running back for Minnesota. They only have 2 running backs that are relevant on the team right now. David Montgomery is the goal line back, but he'll probably only play about 45 to 50% of the snaps. James Conner is old, and we're not a huge fan of him in general, but he is getting, he's still the workhorse for the team. Trey Benson, we thought might be able to take over some of those snaps. That's probably not going to happen, unfortunately. And then the next 2 guys are 2 of the guys that we're getting a ton of in Javonte Williams. We really like his upside. And Najee Harris, we think he is the better back right now for Pittsburgh. Then Ramondre is a guy that I've heard a lot about, but he is on a terrible offense.
Yep.
So that scares me. And then Khalil Herbert. I mean, I'm sorry, not Khalil Herbert. I'm
We
thinking,
want it to be Khalil
yeah,
Herbert.
right. Yeah, if Khalil Herbert's there, we're really happy. DeAndre Swift, Khalil Herbert, and Roshan are all fighting for touches in that offense. I don't know how many touches DeAndre Swift will have, but it will be a committee, and that scares me with him.
Yeah, and so differences in this, just kind of going through each one. Aaron Jones hasn't really moved at all. He stayed 18. He stayed in this tier, at the top of this tier. I like him, don't love him, doesn't
Right.
excite me, but in redraft, he's going lower than you would think. So, worth a flyer. David Montgomery, safe floor guy. I don't think he has any ceiling. His only ceiling is multi-touchdown games,
Right.
but he's going to get you 10 to 12 points every single week. So, if you are thin on running back,
Consistency is good.
James Conner, we moved up a little bit in this tier because Trey Benson didn't really show enough to where it's like he's going to have a roll out the gate. It sounds like he's just a true handcuff early in the season. So, James Conner, we hate you, but guess what? We'll start you if we land.
We have to.
Yeah. Javonte Williams, we're just putting our foot down, man. Samaje Perine gets cut, and all this slander that we heard from Javonte was all for naught. We didn't bite into it whatsoever. We had him at 24 and stayed in this tier the entire summer. But with that being cut, him having a great camp, him getting praise and looking good in the preseason, with Jaleel McLaughlin also looking good.
Right.
It looks like it's just a 1A, 1B. Don't scare that off. Most of these guys are a 1A, 1B situation. He's the goal line bag. He's good. And we have a ton of him, and we just are going to take the shot and be higher on him than everybody. And if he finally becomes a top 20 running back, we can say I told you so. And then Najee, like we said, kind of controversial. Jaylen Warren goes down with an injury, so it kind of helps us feel a little bit better about it. But we just think he's more suited to what Arthur Smith wants to do. I think Cordell Patterson could be annoying as well. But the thing is, it's terms of value and where he's going. So if you're looking at Najee on redraft, he's
25, 23, 23 ranked for all those platforms.
Yeah, it's just kind of about the overall because like on Yahoo, you got to draft him in the 6th round.
Right.
Don't want to touch him there. But in DraftKings, you can get him in the 8th round. Sign me up as RB2.
Yeah.
If you didn't wait, or if you waited and you did a hero approach. So it's just kind of where you get him, and that's kind of what you say. Ramondre we like, and we've gotten a ton of, but he's just going way too high in redraft right now.
Yeah.
On ESPN, he's 58th as of this morning, which is a 5th round ADP. Yahoo's not much better, 62. Sleeper, 69. But on Best Ball, 80s. Same range as Najee, he's going the 8th round. So we've gotten a ton of him because of that. And redraft, it's like you got to spend that much for him. And it's just like for the first 6, 7 rounds, I want guys on good teams.
Right.
And so he's on the arguably worst team. He's going to have like 5 touchdown, 6 touchdown upside. I don't see it getting much better than that, but he's the one guy in that offense that is, I think, can be consistently fantasy relevant.
Yeah.
And then DeAndre Swift, it's a nod because, he had a breakout year last year, but I just don't see him having 10 touchdown upside, and we'll just kind of see what happens. We'll keep it a little cliffhanger as well because we have another Chicago running back that is entering the chat for our tier rankings. So we'll move on to tier 5.
Bang, here it is. And so starting off the tier, one of our favorite guys, biggest risers in everything is Chase Brown. We had a lot of him prior to the news that he was the starter. He's been the starter since camp started. We're still getting him as much as possible in all of our in best ball and everything. He's a guy that, is reasonable in all redraft leagues. So that's always good. The next guy is, Jonathan Brooks, who is in the PUP. Will be out for at least 4 weeks, which we expected, kind of. We were hoping for earlier, but we expected the latter. And so he will be out for those 4 weeks. He's a late season a late season guy that, could win you your fantasy league, though. And that's why you get him.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Brooks, he might be a little bit high, but at the end of the day, there's rookie running backs every year that finishes top 24 guys. It's been forever now that has happened. He's the most talented guy in this class, and he went, or in terms of the situation he is inherited, but he won't play the first 4 games. Hopefully, it's just a slow burn, and he can be a buy low trade potential bait
Right.
at the trade deadline, and then just kind of win you your league. His ADPs is going to drop. We're much higher on him than everybody else. We think that this is the upside that he'll have, and it's just purely a late season RB3 for your team that hopefully you can now get it as an RB4 on all platforms. With Brian Robinson, he's just had a fantastic camp. Cliff Kingsbury's been raving about him. He's better in the pass game than you think, and I don't think that Austin Eckler will be just eating into him as much as you would think. I think it's more so a 60-40 split, and it's an offense that'll probably be more potent now that Cliff Kingsbury, you have Jaden Daniels as a threat, and they need somebody to touch the ball, and he is the prime candidate to have a potential breakout.
Right. The real guy that I want to talk about in this tier is Zamir White.
Yes.
Because
he's the biggest faller.
Yeah. What did he fall? Like 6 spots?
So we had him in the tier above. He had a tear drop. 2 tiers.
2 tiers.
Actually.
Okay. Yeah.
He was right above in 20th.
Wow.
And he dropped all the way to 29. Listen, I hate to say it, but he's just this year's just mid-round running back that's just going to be something that you think is going to inherit a workload, and it just doesn't work out.
Alexander Mattison.
He's Alexander Mattison. He's Mike Davis.
Right, yeah.
He's that guy. He's the one candidate there for that role right now on fantasy platforms for redraft. You got to get him in the 6th round. Obviously, it's a little bit better on best ball drafts, but I just don't want to spend a 6th rounder for a guy that has no passing game upside, and his only upside is just 20 carries for 70 yards.
He has to get 20. He has to get 20 carries, or we are sad.
Exactly. So it's a little bit worrisome. All these guys have pass catching upside,
except him, I guess.
Except him, and so that's just kind of why he dropped down as far as he has. Jaylen Warren, as a 1B, he can still have some role. I just don't feel great starting him consistently in redraft.
Right.
If you want him in best ball and you believe in him over Najee Harris, go for it. I'm not going to stop you whatsoever. But in redraft, if I'm going up against you and it's Jaylen Warren, like it's got to be the game that he gets the 2 touchdowns on 10 touches. That is going to be the reason that you beat me. It's not going to be because he's going to have a consistent breakout year that he's just going to become a high end or low end RB2.
And then, so the next tier, in tier 6, there it is. We've got some guys. We've got 9 guys here in this next tier. Some of the guys that we want to talk about, of course, we have Zeke very high. We haven't talked about his teammate yet. Zeke being at the 32 is, one of those guys that we're excited about. AJ Spears versus Tony Pollard. We didn't really talk about Tony Pollard in the one before this. And then Jerome Ford with Nick Chubb is also up there, but with Nick Chubb on the pup, that means Jerome Ford is the starter for the first 4 weeks.
Yeah, we've gone back and forth between Nick Chubb and Ford, who's higher, who's lower. But at the end of the day, we knew that Chubb was not going to start the season. We knew that Jerome Ford made the most of his opportunity last year, and it's even better now that Deontay Foreman gets cut. So it's just him and Pierre Strong to start the season. He is going to get all the touches he can. He should have a lot of upside for the first half of the season, and so that's why he bumped up where he did. Zach Moss, obviously, biggest dropper. He basically, if you look at our 1.0, he was probably like 30 and Chase Brown was like 40, and they basically flopped because we know that Chase Brown is the 1A,
right,
at least for now. He could vulture some touchdowns, but I don't see him being a consistent threat as a fantasy player. He's more of like a Chase Brown's out tonight.
Spot start. Yeah, for sure.
Showdown contest, discount, chalky guy. That's kind of his upside as a fantasy asset. It's not, I got him as an RB4. We're going to be able to get him as a gem, and he's going to break out. The guy that could do that is Trey Benson, who, we did drop a little bit, but he stayed in this tier. He didn't prove enough to where he would be, any kind of thing more than a handcuff to James Conner. James Conner misses a month every year. He's now approaching 30. And, Trey Benson was our RB1 this year. And, he moved into a situation where it's like, okay, over time, it'll be a slow burn.
But if he does start, Yeah.
because of his rough preseason in terms of just not having any passing game work on the third downs. He was just first, second down. If he doesn't have a third down role, then he's just nothing. He's just going to sit on your bench for a couple of weeks. But again, buy low candidate or just discounted ADP.
For sure.
He's been plummeting as well. And there's no reason why I would draft him behind Blake Corum, who is behind a much better running back that just average leading the league in touches.
Yeah, but Sean McVay. Sean McVay plays their running backs 90% of the time.
And he's 25. He's older. Like,
yeah.
The hype's way too much. But I don't even see the logic of James Conner versus Kyren. Who's a higher risk at getting hurt? I know Kyren has had some minor injuries and stuff like that, but really it was only his first year that he missed significant time. That was a broken foot.
James Conner
every single year is missing something due to a hamstring, a hip, a foot.
Trey Benson comes in for one game, say, and goes for 85 yards, a touchdown, and 3 catches. The next week, they're not going to be like, James Conner's going to play like all the snaps. They're going to be like, okay,
and
this guy can play.
There's never been a guy behind James Conner that could even flirt with taking his kind of reps. So he has upside as a handcuff. He's probably our favorite handcuff. Tajay Spears, worth mentioning as a 1B. Again, he's kind of hard to just trust on a redraft league, but he could have those occasional boom weeks. Devin Singletary is the grossest, starting running back that you can ask for, but he'll have touches. Raheem Mostert, we moved to the top of the tier because, sure, he'll have some upside games, but I'm not touching him at all.
Nope.
In any league, way, shape, or form.
He's a top 25 running back.
He's moved up into a RB2 for every platform except for ESPN.
Yep.
And it's just like,
nope.
That's 5th, 6th round status.
I'm good.
Good luck. Good luck with that.
I agree. So then we'll jump to tier 7. We'll get into the Dallas. I'm so sorry. You get to get a sneak peek. We'll talk about the Dallas running backs here, and then we'll talk about the Chargers running backs.
So Rico Dowdle, he has passed Zeke on all but, I believe, so he hasn't really truly passed him in redraft, but on best ball, both platforms, he's passed Zeke. And I have said this a couple times, but I think this is Ezekiel Elliott's show. And if he does not pan out, he gets banged up. It's not inherited to Rico Dowdle, and he's just going to be a league winner. They're going to bring in somebody else, and he's just going to be the same frustrating guy. So you're telling me he's one of the biggest risers. Now he's in the 110s on best ball drafts, and he's rising up into being drafted on redraft leagues, and I just don't buy it. I'm going to take the stand that he's just not talented enough to inherit 15 to 20 touches. And, if I'm drafting these late round guys, I want to see guys that can spot start and just win leagues. And even if Zeke's out, I don't see him. Now he's getting at 25 touches and he's getting 110 yards. And, the league winner that Tony Pollard was a couple years ago when he, came in for Zeke and he had some 20-point games. I don't see that at all with Rico, but he's at the top of the tier because he has the most defined role for the season long until they bring somebody in.
Yeah, I'm going to cut through some guys real quick because I don't think they're really worth going over
most
as
of these
much.
guys have kind of stayed in the same
tier. This is our handcuff zone, but obviously we'll talk about some that aren't necessarily handcuffs. Blake Corum, handcuffed to Kyren. Tyler Algier, handcuffed to Bijan. Tyler Chandler, handcuffed to Aaron Jones. And then Zach Charbonnet, handcuffed to Kenneth Walker. All these guys need an injury to be relevant, while the other guys on this list we'll talk about, of course, Chuba Hubbard, who will be the starter.
Yeah, so with Jonathan Brooks, like we said on IR, he's just going way too low. And if you were thin on running back early in the draft and you need somebody to just spot start for a month,
that's the guy.
He is going to have a perfect role to get you 14 points.
Yep.
And
he's a receiving back.
He's had some targets and has been productive. He was RB13 for the final 6 weeks of the season last year. And we like him, and he's been in the top 50 the entire time. But now that it's official that he is gaining the workhorse role for 4 games, that's just kind of why we put him up as high as we did.
Yep.
One of the big differences in this tier, obviously, you see Gus Edwards plummet all the way to 49. He is the biggest drop out of any single player in our 150. And it's basically just like, man, why do we keep ranking him above Kamani
and JK? JK is considered the starter.
JK's considered the starter. Gus Edwards is 29. He's never had a workload. He's been banged
Injuries.
up. We haven't really heard from him this preseason because he's been banged up with injury. Kamani Vidal, Vidal, we took the stand on that he was our, league winner because he's, a rookie running back that was productive in college, goes to a situation that's heavily oriented to the run game, and he's behind two guys that have never been healthy for a full season or had just a starting workload.
Right.
And Kamani right now, this is a starter, having a decent camp. We haven't really seen him in the preseason, but Kamani, there was concern of, he's behind Jared Patterson and fighting with the spot with Isaiah Spiller. No, Isaiah Spiller is cut. He is the true RB3, and we were right all along. We shouldn't have just jumped him down for the week that we did.
Yeah.
Just keep him there. We would have him above JK if he actually ran preseason games with the ones. But since he didn't, it's a slow burn. It's a league winner. He'll probably go undrafted, but he's probably going to be a waiver wire priority late in the year or even earlier than that, depending on the situation with JK and Gus Edwards.
Right. And then we'll talk about Jaleel McLaughlin and Khalil Herbert, two guys that jumped into the top 50. If you look at Jaleel, he will be the receiving back. He'll get about 40% of the touches or the run with the ones for Denver. And then Khalil Herbert is a guy that could end up taking the job from DeAndre Swift, in my opinion.
Yeah. So with Jaleel, it's just kind of something that with Samaje getting cut, he's the clear-cut RB2, 1B pass catcher. And he actually, in the preseason when Javonte was playing well, he actually also got some red zone touches as well. Sean Payton has always been in the top 5 since 2013 in our running back targets. He's going to at the very least split that, or if not, get the highest amount. So in a PPR league, worth a flyer on late in drafts. And Khalil Herbert, like you said, he's talented,
he's
man.
Just good.
He's we've gotten so much of him, both him and Roschon, but specifically for him in this matter, he just looked good in preseason. I thought he could be a cut candidate or a trade candidate because his contract year doesn't play special teams, and I just didn't know what would happen. But we just expected a committee. He's basically going to be the Jamal Williams to DeAndre Swift, and he could still, maybe he doesn't get the 20 carries, but he gets exactly what David Montgomery is going to get in terms of an upside, and he's going undrafted. So
Absolutely.
Again, he's a guy that we just vaulted up because he's a guy we love. And all these guys that were Antonio Gibson's, Marshawn Lloyd's that are just banged up,
one of my
we
favorite.
don't believe in.
Yeah.
This guy has a legit opportunity to be an RB2, 1B, and maybe even take goal line work away from the starter and inherit more if he continues to produce.
Yep. One of my favorite late rounds flyers. We're going to get into the wide receivers now, looking at this first group that you might have already seen. All of these guys are just really good at football. They are the best receivers in football. All 6 of these guys, Tyreek, Jamar, and JJ are my 3. If I had to rank best receivers in football, it's those 3. All of them are going to have they're target hogs. Not really much to talk about in this tier. We've kind of left it the exact same, except for we jumped Garrett Wilson from the tier 2 to tier 1.
Yeah, so CD gets signed, no concern anymore. Jamar Chase, finally practicing, no concern anymore. Tyreek Hill, I'm not concerned about his hand cast. It's gone.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yep.
We ball. And then Amon-Ra, one of the safest guys in the entire first round if you're in PPR league because he just has so much volume. Only concern is, he only had 5 end zone targets last year. He still scored 10 times. But if you are an opponent offense that has a lot of competition for touchdowns, how often is it, and you're a math major and love, if you just only have 5 opportunities but you score 10 times?
It's just not going to happen like that every time.
It's going to be negative regression.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It has to reset in one way or the other. Either he's going to inherit more red zone targets or he's going to go down in touchdowns and still have the 120 receptions that we know he can have. Justin Jefferson, he's the best receiver in football. No denying that. He has no competition in the early parts of the season for targets and touches because Jordan Addison is unknown with not only a suspension, but his high ankle sprain. TJ Hawkinson's on the pup. It's just him and Sam Darnold having a 1-2 tango. And he's good. I just kind of prefer the other 4.
Biggest difference in quarterback.
If I'm in the first 6 picks, I just kind of prefer going those guys or going the running backs. And if we're looking at our overalls, he's behind these 4 guys, and then the 3 running backs that we have as our top 3. And then Garrett Wilson, damn it,
It's time.
He is going to have the touches.
Yes,
he's going to have the target. He is the alpha. Aaron Rodgers just peppers targets to the wide receiver ones every year. Malachi Corley has been a no-show in preseason. Mike Williams is not going to be on the pup, but I don't see any kind of consistent target share from him. Tyler Conklin, below average tight end. Aaron Rodgers doesn't throw to him anyway. So it's just him and Breece Hall. And he's going to have just 12 targets a game and just be a monster. And so with that being said, we moved him up because A.J. Brown has target competition with Devontae and Saquon and Dallas Goedert and now Jahan Dotson. He's got nothing. And so it's just like, if he has legitimate upside to be a wide receiver overall 1,
he's got to be in
this first tier.
Absolutely.
And so that's why we moved him up. He didn't move above anybody, but he is now in this tier.
Yep.
This second tier has kind of gotten smaller, but A.J. Brown, very good. We love him as a player, but he has a lot of competition. Devontae Smith outscored him the second half of the year last year, and I just don't know how consistent you can get. He is going in the first round. So if I'm going to pick any of the 12 that are going in the first round, who presents the highest risk of returning where they are currently going, is probably him. And it's uncomfortable saying that, but we just kind of got to call it out like we see it. Puka, he's banged up. He's kind of returned to practice at a limited basis. I don't love the fact that his ADP has condensed as close as it has on best ball platforms, with him and Cooper Kupp basically being within a half round of each other. But, he was still a top 5 wide receiver historical season. He deserves to be there because he's going to have a ton of targets if he's healthy. It's just depending on how lingering this knee injury will be.
Right. Marvin Harrison, rookie, highest we'll ever see drafted, possibly. I mean, until if he does everything that he's supposed to do, we'll see more rookie wide receivers drafted this high. And then Devontae Adams, tough quarterback situation. That's the only reason he's at 10, because he is so good at football, and he will have 15 targets.
He's been
in
the
that
top
offense.
3 in targets for 3 straight years. There's nothing to say. He's one of the best receivers in football still. He is not dwindled whatsoever. It's just a quarterback situation. There's slight unhappiness in Las Vegas, so maybe there could be a trade there. Who knows? But we're not going to speculate that. He's actually falling in drafts, so it's even less risk.
Yeah, take him
this high.
Yeah, exactly. He's actually behind these guys in the tier 3. A bunch of these guys in tier 3. I'm looking at Drake London, Mike Evans, Debo. We actually did have some movement in this tier between our last ranking and this one. Drake London was not at 11 before. We do see his upside. We don't believe that he should be going in the middle of the second round.
So this is the thing with him. We believe in the upside, but we were kind of turned off because as soon as we started this best ball, drafts and stuff like that, he was already at the 1-2.
Oh yeah, it's too early.
And so we were just like, that's too high of a risk for somebody that hasn't done it yet.
Yeah.
But if you look at the redraft leagues, he's going in the 3-4.
Yeah, he's reasonable for sure.
He's much more reasonable because now you're guaranteeing as a wide receiver 2, maybe even wide receiver 3. And it's true. He has not much competition for targets other than Kyle Pitts. And I'm not sure if they can all put it together, but he's probably more comfortable in putting it together compared to Kyle Pitts.
Right.
So we just had to put him there. We're probably not taking much of him at all in redraft, but he's actually dropping a little bit into the mid to late second round. And then, like I said, he's going at a very reasonable range from redraft leagues. So we wanted to put him here. Mike Evans has been as consistent as it comes.
Easy.
He's the only problem is he's just kind of a fringe wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. There's actually not as many like high-end wide receiver 1s outside of the first 2 tiers. A lot of them kind of present a lot of higher risk. He is now 31. And it's just kind of like, is he going to just continue to ball out, or is he finally due for, a down year
regression
/ injury? We moved Debo into this tier a couple weeks ago. I think he was just outside right before we did our ranking, our 2.0. But, we moved him in because he's just a pretty safe wide receiver 2. The problem is he just kind of rose with the ADP because of the Brandon Ayuk trade request. And so I don't know. He's kind of uncomfortable, but he's got correlation because we like Detroit players and Dallas players and Philly players. And so we like him there. The Houston receivers, I don't care what order you have, but they both need to be in this tier.
Absolutely. And Tank Dell, not Tank Dell.
It's not Tank Dell. Tank Dell is going to be productive, but not as a 4th round AD.
% of the routes, and that hurts too much. While these two guys are both going to be on the field for 100% of the routes.
Every single platform has Nico ahead of Stephon Diggs, but also Nico didn't break out until Tank Dell went down.
Right.
So who knows if he can truly be a wide receiver 1 like he's trying to go in terms of ADP. Stephon Diggs has been there, done that. He had a bad end of the year.
We expected it.
But he's in a better offense. Now he has less burden to where he's not the only guy. It's not him and Gabe Davis. Him and another 4 guys that could just go for 100 yards.
Yep.
They cut a guy that went for 200 yards last year.
Yep.
They cut him because they didn't have room for him because there's so many good receivers on that team. So with that being said, I just think that people are too low on him and he needs to be in this tier until proven otherwise. I'm not going to just have a small end of the season sample size. I was right last year when I was like, I'm going to avoid him because of that strength of schedule in the year. And I'm going to be right again when everybody's avoiding him because of that same break that he just had.
And then Olave, a guy that worries me a little bit, but he deserves to be in this tier based on his production in recent years. And I think this tier is pretty strong. I mean, for everybody that, just consistency wise. Let's get to tier 4. Some of these guys are definitely capable of being in tier 3. We just happen to have that tier break. Talking about some of these guys, we've already talked about teammates to Devontae Smith and Cooper Kupp. They could end up flipping where they're at just based on if, opportunity arises. We've seen Devontae Smith outscore AJ Brown. We've seen Cooper Kupp win the Triple Crown. So it wouldn't surprise me that much if they were the better receiver in those offenses.
Yeah. So with the majority of these guys have another elite weapon that they are competing with. The other 3, there's concerns about either quarterback situation or just consistent volume. So we'll kind of go with the dupes. So Devontae Smith, like you said, with AJ Brown and obviously Saquon Barkley and Goddard and Jahan Dotson.
Right.
Competition for targets, but he is having his best offseason. He's in the slot now.
He's good.
Kellen Moore slot receivers absolutely killing in fantasy. And so that's why he's at the top of this tier. Cooper Kupp's been our darling for about 5 years now. He's dwindling down. He just had a hammy injury last year. He's risen a little too much for my liking on best ball, but he's still going reasonably in the 4th round on redraft. Perfect target to go with. DJ Moore, wide receiver 1 in Chicago. He just got signed. He's just never been a consistent wide receiver 1. Last year, his number 2 was Darnell Mooney.
Right.
Now he's got Rome Odunze, a top 10 pick. Keenan Allen, a target hog. Gerald Everett's an annoying pest when it comes to running or receiving targets. Cole Kmet, 7 touchdowns last year. DeAndre Swift is the scat back. Yeah. So there's just a lot of mouths to feed. He's kind of right where everybody else has him. Not really changing much. Brandon Ayuk moved him down because of the trade request.
And he hasn't practiced.
The gut says that he's going to be staying with San Fran. He had a breakout year last year, but there's the injury risk, there's target competition, like you said, or like
all of these guys, yeah.
DK Metcalf, he had a sick highlight touchdown grab the final preseason game. Offense much caters to him. We just kind of prefer the values of JSN and Kenneth Walker where they're currently going. But perfectly fine as a wide receiver 2, even 3. Zay Flowers, Lamar's just never been a guy that produces fantasy relevant receivers. He had a breakout year last year. That was the ADP of a 10 plus rounder.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's in the 3rd, 4th round. Is he going to return that? I don't know. He's kind of right where everybody else has him. We actually are a little bit higher on him. They've actually dropped him behind some of these guys that we're about to talk about. But yeah, it was a little bit concerning, but he's the only true wide receiver 1 with no other wide receivers to compete with. It's just low volume passing offense.
Yeah, and then Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, of course, is another tandem we keep talking about. Jalen Waddle needs the target upside. He needs, he has the explosiveness, but it's a little hard. Sometimes he only has 5 targets, 6 targets. That scares me a little bit.
Yeah, we fell last year for some of our ownership that they could produce 2 wide receiver ones, and 2 led the league in passing, and
Still couldn't do that.
And yeah, could not do that. It's really hard to do that. He's capable of doing that. He's talented enough, but now he's also banged up. I just don't love it right now.
Right.
Keenan Allen, we're much higher on than everybody else. Everybody wants to look into the 230-pound comment.
That's just weird.
Bro, just look at him. Look at him.
He's fine.
He looks fine.
Guys, he's fine.
The only problem is, again, same thing to DJ Moore, is that he has target competition, and he's also the oldest one. But we just feel very safe with him. He's going now as a wide receiver 4. So, we consider him in the range where, like, if he ends up being your wide receiver 2, I don't love it, but it's okay. We can make it work. You get him as a wide receiver 4, just he's the easiest click.
Yeah.
George Pickens, listen. M and I don't love him as a talent. His effort is much to be desired. But he's all that offense has in terms of the passing game. They just don't have anybody. It sounds like they're not going forward with the Brandon Ayuk trade. So as long as that is not the case, he has all in front of him to be a wide receiver, high-end wide receiver 2 this year and smash his ADP. He's actually falling in drafts. Don't really get it. I feel like you would only be falling if you're injured or you got competition. He has neither. He's balling. He's had multiple highlight plays through preseason and camp. He should be in this top 25, and that's why he is.
Yep. And then Amari Cooper. I mean, he's the number 1 for Cleveland, and he's aging, but he's still really good at football. Yeah. I think he's fine.
The biggest concern with him is that his breakout came after Deshaun went down when Joe Flacco was throwing. He's never really truly had that, alpha consistency with Deshaun Watson. So it's a little bit on paper hopeful, wishful thinking, but he deserves to be in this tier because he's that talented.
And then we're going to try to get through this next group as fast as possible, but there are a lot of them. I think, we're going to hit on some of the big ones, of course, guys that, either fell into this tier or have been moved up. Lots of rookies have been moved up to this tier. So let's run through some of the rookies. There's 5 of them, I believe, maybe even more. I can't even count.
So Malik Neighbors, very talented. Offense sucks. He won't have touchdown upside, and his ADP is way too high for us.
Yep,
so,
easy.
Pittman Jr., we dropped in this tier. Anthony Richardson is not a great quarterback. He just has rushing upside, and he's really big. But all of his production came with Gardner Minshew. He had 1 bad game and 1 good game, but he's going as a 3rd rounder. I don't want to touch him.
Right.
T. Higgins, especially as a wide receiver 12, bro.
Man.
T. Higgins, really quick with him. Bunch of open competition for targets gone now that Tyler Boyd's no longer there. Joe Mixon obviously as well. And
great in preseason.
Made highlight play after highlight play. Jamar Chase, is back now, but I see this tandem being a team capable of having 2 wide receiver 1s. Plus, he's in a contract year. Terry McLaurin bumped him up a couple spots. Jahan Dotson's no longer there. He is the true alpha.
Yes.
There's nothing else left to say about him. Rasheed Rice, we jumped up as well. He's not getting suspended.
Jumped up him and Xavier Worthy.
Him and Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy back and healthy from his early OTA injury. Rasheed Rice sounds like he's not getting suspended. Marquise Brown also went down.
Yep. He's also in this tier.
You can't have Patrick Mahomes as a quarterback 2 and not have 2, a couple weapons in the top 40 at their position.
Yep.
Christian Kirk's dropped a little bit, but he's a really good player, and he is an offense that we really like. It caters to him, and we think he's a very safe wide receiver 3.
Well, I was going to say Christian Kirk's 2 receiver sets he doesn't get in on 2 receiver sets, and that's what scares us the most, because the guy under him at 40 is in on every 2 receiver set, and Brian Thomas Jr. That guy has made some big plays as a rookie also in preseason. So, and then we'll talk about the tandem of Green Bay players.
Yeah. So, Christian Watson, he's just going too late for, boom. I probably prefer him in best ball because I don't know when those 20-point weeks are going to come, but he's capable of it. Jaden Reed feels very safe. He actually, we have a prop when we're going to be talking about week 1 props. His total yards in week 1 came out, and we smashed it, and it went down. And they lost 2 running backs. Basically, they're not going to have 2 running backs for week 1, so it makes us feel even better about that all-purpose yard prop.
Absolutely.
So be on the lookout for that. Calvin Ridley,
Yeah,
look pretty well with Will Levis. The thing is, he and Hop, who is also in this ranking, I don't know how the target share is going to be. I
right.
think both of them just kind of have an even bit. And if DeAndre Hopkins is going in the 8th, 9th round, and I get Calvin Ridley going in the 5th, 6th, I'd rather just take
Wait.
the 3-round discount if they're going to have similar numbers.
For sure.
Jason, he's been up in this tier the entire time in the middle of it. We love him. He was the first person that we saw when we looked at ADPs at start the year. Had a couple highlight plays with Geno Smith in his limited sample. He's the wide receiver 2 on that team. Offense cares to him. Get some JSN shares. Godwin, same thing. Slot role again. He's
Solid.
older now, but he's in the passing offense that really doesn't have much other than him and Mike Evans. Jalen McMillan, we love a lot too. He could be a handcuff, quote unquote, to a receiver, but he's very safe. He's just been a guy that doesn't really have the touchdown upside, especially with Baker Mayfield. He really hasn't developed that red zone chemistry with him. Tank Dell, if he was going around this tier, I'd be all over him. But
Yeah,
he's not. So let's move it on.
Next, I guess, is Keon Coleman. He's possibly the number 1 receiver in Buffalo. He's going to have to compete with Dalton Kincaid to see who has the most targets and touchdown targets. But he is solid because of the situation he is in. Deontay Johnson, a guy that could be the number 1 for the Panthers. We are expecting him to be. He's a guy that's had, upwards of 10 targets a game when he was in Pittsburgh. And I would expect Bryce Young to kind of go for him as much as possible for the veteran savvy. And then we talked about Hop. And the last guy on this list that we haven't talked about is Rome Odunze, who we've talked about both of his teammates already. He's going to be in a 3-headed monster, and that's why he's actually lower. But he is more talented, in my opinion, than a lot of the guys that we just talked about just by overall talent.
To mention that we did gloss over for a second, Brian Thomas, he was a big riser as well. He just looks really good. He's in 2 wide receiver sets. He just looks like he's as talented as we had him in our draft rankings.
Exactly.
So he has his capabilities of being a wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville. So that's why we bumped him above a couple of the rookies that we just mentioned.
Yep. And then tier 6. It's a much smaller tier. That was our biggest tier, was 19 players. Now we're going to go to a tier with 8 guys. These guys are a little bit, more, you get much more nervous with these guys. Starting with Jordan Addison, most likely suspended for the first 3 games
it's middle season suspension. It's not going to be, his risk is he also has an injury.
Yeah, so, right. So he could miss 6 games.
Yeah, he could miss as much as 6 games.
Right.
It's also Sam Darnold. I don't know. We had to move him down because it's not positive reports from him for either on the field or off the field stuff with him.
Right.
Cortland Sutton, wide receiver 1, less competition for targets. Bo Nix looked really good. I just hope the chemistry is there, but he's a guy that has 10 touchdown upside. We've seen that before. For sure. Jameson Williams, everybody's got him at 48 essentially in a redraft league.
He got moved up
He's the 5th-year option. I don't know when, or the 5th option in that offense. I don't know when I would ever start him in a redraft league. But in best ball, he's the same as Christian Watson to a lesser extent that could have those spike weeks.
Right.
But he's actually had a full camp for the first time. So we'll just truly see what happens after his first kind of rough rookie and sophomore seasons.
And then trying to figure out who the wide receiver 1 in Los Angeles for the Chargers is going to be is tough. So Ladd McConkey and Josh Palmer are both in this tier. Not a very high passing offense. They're not going to throw the ball very much. We've seen Josh Palmer in the past be really good when one of their receivers has gone down, and Ladd McConkey being the young buck that has made some really good plays while in preseason, so in training camp. So they're both exciting in my opinion. Curtis Samuel fighting to be the number 1 receiver for Buffalo, but he has an injury currently that will most likely not hold him out in week 1. He'll probably be back by week 1. That's the plan for them.
The biggest thing is Khalil Shakir is rising, and he's past him, and I don't buy it, and M doesn't buy it.
No way. Curtis Samuel's good at football.
Curtis Samuel's good at football. He was reportedly a gadget guy. They don't really have much else. It's just unfortunate that we didn't really see a sample, but Josh Allen also didn't play in the preseason, so it is what it is. Jacoby Myers had a killer preseason. He's a slot receiver now with the Raiders. Problem is, it's Gardner Minshew, below average offense. But say Devontae Adams does get traded.
Wow.
Boom.
Yeah,
Like
huge.
the potential winning upside as the by default only other guy as a wide receiver. I don't even know who your wide receiver 3 is.
Trey Tucker.
Trey Tucker. It doesn't even matter. It's just him and Brock
Because
Bowers.
we only run two tight end sets always.
Yeah. So essentially, running games below average. Doesn't have a deep receiving core. It's him, Bowers, and Devontae Adams. And if Devontae, for some reason, were to just hold out, sit out,
Why not,
whatever,
right?
he is going to inherit a ton. He's going to be a value week in and week out in best ball, or not in best ball, in DFS contests. Josh Palmer, like he said, we've seen it before. Rashid Shaheed, he's the wide receiver too.
Yeah.
He's
the boom guy.
He's the boom guy. He's had a decent camp, but he's been kind of hampered with injury over the last couple of weeks. We just like his boom upside. Again, He's not a guy that we're going to draft.
More best
He's
ball.
going to be undrafted, but in best ball, wide receiver 5 or 6.
Cool.
Serviceable.
Yeah. And then tier 7, we'll run through this tier. It's a bunch of guys that, have upside if they can establish a wide receiver 1 or 2 on their offense. Some of them wide receiver 1 with some of the worst offenses, right? Tyler Lockett, probably the wide receiver 3 for Seattle. We're expecting that, but if he is the wide receiver 2, it's probably a good value. Jerry Jeudy has not performed up to what he could be, but he's basically getting Elijah Moore's role from last year, and if he can run with that as the wide receiver 2 for the Browns, then that would be good for him. Brandon Cooks is, the outside receiver for the Cowboys. Could be, a long, big play upside type of guy. I don't see very good floors out of him right now, in my opinion, but he would be someone that I could see getting, a few targets and then making the most of them, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he's a tough guy that, last year he was wide receiver 38, but he had 11 points a game. He missed a couple games, but he had some boom games, and that's exactly the range that he's going at. He's just the default number 2 in a high-scoring offense that also has no run game at the very moment. David Legette, he's a late season player that we would like to have some shares of. Deontay Johnson obviously is the by default wide receiver 1 there. They also have Adam Thielen, but he's just really good at football, and
great athlete.
I just hope that he's able to amass to it, because this, as big as the and deep as this receiving class was, there's going to be guys that don't pan out,
right?
And he's at the kind of high risk that didn't go to a great situation, and he's already starting to be banged up a couple times.
And he was a late bloomer. I mean, he was pretty bad until his last year. So and Spencer Rattler was kind of helped him get to that point. So we're hoping he kind of, overplays that. We have a lot of him in best ball. The next guy, Demario Douglas, we have a lot in best ball also. He's a guy that we're hoping will be the number 1 option in New England, but he only plays in 3 receiver sets. So when he's on the field, we're hoping he gets just peppered with targets. At least that's the plan. Romeo Doubs is a guy that we actually had to bring in, both Michael Wilson and Romeo Doubs. We moved from outside the rankings into these last 2 spots. Romeo Doubs is just in a offense with so many target options, and so that really hurts his value.
Yeah, we're way lower on him than consensus, and a lot of that consensus is heavily driven by best ball. And I have no idea why he's in the top 100. He's the most confusing one in that 90 to 100 range of just like wide receiver 5 or QB1.
Yeah.
Like, what reason are you going to invest in him who's never been, close to fantasy relevant for a season-long league in the top 100? Like, I just don't see it. And if he does, that's going to be because Jaden Reed and
Christian Watson didn't
bust.
pan out.
Because guess what? Dontavian Wicks
is really
like
good
right
too.
behind him.
Yeah.
And so it's like not all of them are going to return value on their ADP, and he's probably the least likely because I don't see 3 top 100 receivers out of this tier. But there were so many injuries and busts and whatnot that we had to mention that. Michael Wilson, high five. We just killed that call, a late round call. Even when Zay Jones came in,
and who is now
we had
suspended.
faith. He's now suspended for unknown reason. They haven't even really disclosed, other than just suspended 5 games for whatever. It doesn't matter. It's Michael Wilson. He's really good. He had a really strong rookie year. He's by default a wide receiver 2. Greg Dortch can run around like an ad inside, and he'll just get some important touches. Has multi-touchdown in a game upside. And Kyler Murray has done pretty well with receivers in the past. So
Yep.
we felt great about that call. He's approached the top 150 in both of the best ball platforms. He's basically unranked on Sleeper and ESPN, but guess what? We're not really targeting you anyways there.
Right, for sure.
It's purely a best ball play when you're thinking about wide receiver 60.
Absolutely. And then we'll start off our tight ends. We didn't really change our tight ends. Top 5 is, I think, the exact same as it was before. We are getting it. One big thing about this is the top 2 in Travis Kelce and Sam Laporta, they're pushed up a lot more in most drafts, in most of the rankings, while these other 3 are a little bit farther back, so you get a discount on them. We could see any of these guys being tight end 1. We keep telling everybody how deep this tight end class is. Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce both, have really solid floors. But so do actually everybody here has great floors and great ceilings.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I guess one of the big differences is that on all but Underdog, Kelce is now past Laporta to be the tight end 1.
Right.
But with that being said, both of them have dropped from the 2-3 turn to late third.
Right.
And so now we're starting to talk. I brought it before where we're not really getting either guy because I think that Dalton Schultz and Trey McBride and Mark Andrews all have the same kind of ceiling going to. Nine days away from kickoff.
Right. Yeah, I need to get him here.
Yeah. We gotta get
He's
you
in
there.
the first game too.
Exactly.
With Kelce.
His ADP in terms of his overall ADP has actually dropped a full round compared to everybody else.
Oh.
But he was the tight end 3 for most of those platforms before that. So I think it kind of separated to where he's right next to McBride and Kincaid, which they all are. They're really talented. But yeah, let's go to this next tier, which is also an important tier and the last tier that you should really even care about, especially if you're a redrafter.
Yeah, we'll probably fly through the tier 3 through 5, but this tier right here. So basically, how I look at it is you should get a guy in one of these tiers on your team. Just make sure you get one of them, because after that you're really nervous when it comes to tight end. In this tier, you get the George Kittles of the world, where we have moved him to 6 because of the Brandon Ayuk talks. If Brandon Ayuk were to come back, it's a little bit different. We might move him back. But right now we had expected a Brandon Ayuk to leave. So that was big. But Kittle, one of the boom bust guys on this group. Kyle Pitts, we haven't seen it yet, but he's finally got a better quarterback, a new offense, changes everything for his ability and what he could do. Evan Ingram had 2 touchdowns in this preseason game. He was a guy that we didn't like because he didn't get red zone targets. Well, now look at that. He got 2 of them.
Yeah.
And then Brock Bowers, rookie, amazing football player. He's going to have all the upside in the world. They're playing him at fullback, slot, and tight end. So
once again, you can't put Sam Laporta as tight end 1 or 2 and then not believe a more talented player can be the same thing.
Yeah,
because he can't.
Yeah,
his one sample size is preseason action. He's lined up in the slot. He lined up out wide. He lined up in line. He can line up in the backfield, and it looked awesome.
Yep.
So he's that dude. Jake Ferguson, he was a serviceable tight end last year. He was a guy that one of our best late round calls. Tight ends with Cowboys always produce. They lost Michael Gallup, and it's really just kind of underwhelming receiving corps other than CeeDee Lamb. So he's very safe as a tight end. David Njoku, kind of a similar boat to Amari Cooper, where he didn't really truly break out until after Deshaun got hurt, but he really came into his own. I think he was tight end 1 to end the season for the last few weeks. So
he could also be the number 2 receiving option for the offense.
So any of these guys, you can't really go wrong. I highly recommend in best ball you draft 2 of them and then just don't worry about the position. If you're in redraft, just draft 1, maybe 2 if it was one of the last 2. But I'd rather not have to decide, is it Jake Ferguson this week? Is it Njoku? Is it George Kittle? Is it Kyle Pitts this week? I'd rather just have my guy and just start him every week and reap the rewards.
For sure. And then tier 3 got smaller, but it's guys that we have, have upside, but you're not going to get consistency out of any of these guys. Dallas Goedert and Dalton Schultz both have serious amounts of competition. Pat Fryermuth is one of my most nervous players because he is not running enough tight end spots, and he's playing on Arthur Smith offense.
He would be down in rankings if there was somebody that was
Yeah,
worthy.
yeah, exactly. Just wait till you see who 16 is.
Yeah, exactly. TJ Hawkinson, he'd obviously be in tier 1 if he didn't tear his ACL.
Right, of
He's
course.
on the PUP. He's missing the first 4 weeks. I don't know if he'll miss more time, but I'm more optimistic that an ACL injury can be more of a rebound season from the tight end position than like running back.
Running back.
So we'll just kind of see what happens with him. If you want to stash him because you have IR spots, if he's eligible, do it. And if you're in redraft or in best ball, you need a tight end 2 or 3. He's the safest guy. I'd rather have him than anything below.
Yes.
And we'll talk about one of the guys in a second that's passed him in ADP.
Yep. So here's the next group. This group is it's just hard, man, because like Cole Kmet, he's fighting with Gerald Everett for snaps. Luke Musgrave, when Tucker Kraft comes back, he's going to be fighting, and he's in an offense with 5 receivers, damn near. Taysom Hill has upside, and that's why. Go ahead and tell him what about TJ Hawkinson.
There's no reason a 34-year-old scat back that's tight and eligible should be above TJ Hawkinson. Nope. I'm just not going to do it. Go for it. Good luck to you. I guess one relevant thing is that Yahoo, in between our last ranking and this time, they made him tight end eligible, which I don't love doing it in between like draft season.
Right.
However, good on you. I guess that kind of gives them a slight boost, maybe more comfortable because the Saints offense just doesn't have a ton outside of Olave and Alvin Kamara right now. K. Dotton, I like him as a player a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Actually. But he just had no fantasy relevant outside of 2 games where he had 11 targets, and I think he had a 2 touchdown game as well. But outside of that, it's like 4 targets a game. Can't really live with it. Hunter Henry, he's always been a touchdown threat, but last year, like 4 targets a game, 5 targets. He's already banged up. I don't know what to tell you. Isaiah Likely, we bumped up into this tier because I think as a tight end 2 on that team can still be the third option, in the passing game. And if Mark Andrews went down, guess where he's going? Because he finished as the top 5 tight end in the times when Mark Andrews went down. The final 6 weeks of the season, he was tight end 5, I believe. So he has all the upside to be above that. And similar to Justin Fields and why he's tier 5, he had to be in this tier because of that.
Then in tier 5, we got Tyler Conklin to kick it off. I don't really know what to do down here, but you have to kind of put him here because he is in an offense that should be good enough, and he could end up being the second receiving option. So,
yeah, and he's just, I don't like him at all.
No.
Again, this is just like a lot has to go wrong for this range to be worthwhile as our tier name. I don't know what he can do to be a consistent tight end for anybody. Ben Sinnott, we like, but he's just kind of stuck behind Zach Ertz. Maybe late in the year, he can kind of do what Trey McBride did his rookie year, where he had a couple of spike weeks to end the season, but was nothing the first half of the season. That's kind of where he's at. He's kind of stuck in that purgatory. Jonnu Smith actually has some upside now. I didn't expect that because Mike McDaniel has never really had a tight end relevant in that offense. But Odell Beckham's on the pup. And outside of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle from the passing game perspective and the running backs, I guess, there's no other competition. He had it in around. He looked involved in the offense when he was with the one, so he had to be up there. And then Noah Fant, everybody's darling, is here by default.
Yep.
That's it.
Don't
draft any of these guys, and that's all I got to say.
Definitely draft the top 11. That's what we want to preach. We're preaching that as much as possible. Those 11 guys, you have to get at least one of them. If you're in a 12 team and you miss out on them, you're going to be really trying to figure out what to do every week with tight end. So just listen to us on this. That is super important. And so that's the end. Let me stop sharing. That is the end of our Fantasy 3.0 rankings. We really appreciate y'all hanging out with us for all that time. We've wanted to get through everybody, of course, and 110 between running backs and wide receivers. So making sure that we hit on everybody, giving y'all the most fantasy upside for each of those players and talking through everyone. So
Yeah, we appreciate you guys tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe. Check out all the videos. We got a ton of stuff coming out. I know it's peak draft season. That's why I hope that this tier and ranking list helps you as much as possible to win your
Right.
league, be relevant in best ball and redraft. It doesn't matter. Beat your friends. Shout us out if it does work out in your favor.
Right, of course.
Because I hope so. And if we're wrong, call us out too, because I want to know. Because we're not going to just shy away or hide or delete videos when we're wrong about Anthony Richardson. We're going to be like, oh yeah, he killed it this year. We were wrong about that. We were not hugely profitable last year in best ball, largely due to injuries and stuff. What can you do? This year, we feel very good about where we're at. All of the injuries right now, knock on wood, are going towards our favor, or guys that we have little to no shares of. Everybody, the late round flyers that we're doing are going positive, in terms of, rising and whatnot. We just feel really good about where we're at. We're going to be fighting a lot over some of these guys that we love on Saturday when we do our friend league draft. So yeah, it'll be exciting to talk about, watch. But until then, we will see you guys next time.
Yep. Have a good one, guys.